Just because she wanted to surprise her husband, Evelyn witnessed the very scene that would bring her entire marriage crashing down. That afternoon, she stood before the glass doors of Jacob's office building, a gift-wrapped box still in her hands. But the person who walked out with him wasn't a colleague. It was Mia, the best friend she trusted more than anyone. They embraced, not the casual hug of friends, but the intimate, lingering kind that only betrayers share. The terrifying part wasn't the shock of it, but the fact that Evelyn didn't move. She just stood there, a faint smile on her lips, and pulled out her phone. In that second, a plan was born. A plan that would make them both pay a price far steeper than anything they could ever imagine. But the story doesn't begin in that moment. No one knew that before she stood, watching her husband hold her best friend, Evelyn had believed in their marriage with every fiber of her being. 3 years earlier, she thought she was the plof, luckiest woman alive, with a gentle husband, a peaceful home, and a best friend who was there for every joy and sorrow. It all seemed perfect, until it was revealed to be nothing more than a meticulously staged play. And to understand how Evelyn could be so cold in that fateful moment, we have to go back to where the first mistake was made. Evelyn had always considered herself a fortunate woman, not because she was born or into wealth, nor because her life had been without its struggles, but because she had met Jacob, the man she once thought would hold her hand for the rest of her life. 3 years ago, on a drizzly afternoon, Evelyn first met Jacob in a small coffee shop on a quiet street corner. She was struggling with a frozen laptop on a tight deadline to send a contract to a client, and he happened to be at the next table, noticing her frustration. Without much fuss, Jacob calmly helped her fix the issue, then smiled and said, simply, "Next time, remember to back up your data." It was his quiet competence and thoughtfulness that left a deep impression on Evelyn. From chance encounters, they grew closer. Jacob wasn't the overly romantic type, but he had a way of making her feel secure. He remembered she liked her coffee, with just a splash of cream, knew she'd forget to eat on busy days, and always seemed to show up right when she needed him. For Evelyn, love didn't need grand gestures. It just needed one person who was consistently and sincerely there. And Jacob was at least in the beginning. After a year of dating, they decided to get married. The wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was warm and full of love. Friends envied Evelyn for marrying a man who was both kind and ambitious. In everyone's eyes, Jacob was the model family man. He left work on time, wasn't one for late nights out, and always put his wife first. Their married life flowed by like a calm river. Evelyn built her online business from home, while Jacob worked at a downtown marketing firm. Every morning, she'd wake up early to make breakfast and he'd help clean up before heading to work. In the evenings, they'd have dinner together, watch a movie, and talk about the small things that made up their day. There were no big fights, no dramatic events to worry about. It was all so peaceful that no one imagined it could ever shatter. In Evelyn's life, there was another crucial person, Mia. They had known each other since college, surviving the toughest years together. Mia knew Evelyn so well she could read her thoughts just by looking at her. When Evelyn got married, Mia was the one by her side, helping with every little detail of the wedding. After graduation, Mia struggled to find a stable job, frequently changing workplaces. She would often come to Evelyn to vent or simply find a place to unwind. Evelyn never saw it as a burden. To her, it was natural. Mia wasn't just a friend, she was family. Even Jacob was close with Mia. Dinners with the three of them were a regular occurrence. Jacob was always polite and proper, sometimes even helping Mia with small favors. Evelyn once joked, "The way you two get along, I'm not sure if he's my husband or your friend." Each time they would both just laugh. A laugh that, at the time, Evelyn never thought could hide anything sinister. As time went on, Evelyn's business flourished. She started earning more, getting busier, and sometimes didn't have as much time to notice the small shifts in her life. The same went for Jacob. He often said work was piling up, that he had to work overtime or meet with clients. Late nights at the office became more frequent. At first, Evelyn would ask about it, but Jacob's answers were always so natural, so plausible, that she had no reason to doubt him. Mia also started appearing more often. Sometimes she'd drop by to visit, sometimes she'd stay for dinner, and on a few occasions, she even slept over, because it was too late to go home. Evelyn never thought twice about it. In her mind, you didn't need to keep a distance from family. Above all, she trusted them both. But some things don't change without a reason. It's just that when you trust someone too much, you miss the smallest signs. Like how Jacob started sharing less about his work, or how Mia would sometimes avoid her gaze when his name came up, or the text messages that would appear and then be quickly deleted. It was all so subtle, so easy to dismiss. And Evelyn dismissed it all. She continued to live in the world she believed was happy, still convinced that what she had was real, and that the people by her side were sincere. Until one day, a small decision she made unintentionally ripped the curtain back on. Everything she never wanted to see. But that was for later. For now, in their cozy little condo filled with the warm glow of evening lights, Evelyn was still smiling, believing her life would always be this peaceful. She had no idea that everything was just the calm before a storm that, when it hit, would sweep it all away. That morning began like any other, but Evelyn felt a different kind of energy. It wasn't anxiety, but an indescribable excitement, like when she was a girl, with her first crush, when just the thought of the other person was enough to make the whole day bright. She woke up earlier than usual, slipping out of bed, quietly so as not to wake Jacob, casting a soft light on his face. In that moment, Evelyn smiled. 3 years into their marriage, she still felt a sense of peace just looking at him. For her, happiness wasn't about big things, but simple, quiet mornings like this. She went to the kitchen to make breakfast, but today she put in a little extra effort, partly because she was in a good mood, and partly because she wanted to do something special for Jacob. He'd been so busy lately. The late nights, long work calls, and the occasional sigh he let out when he thought she wasn't looking. Evelyn saw it all, but she didn't say anything. She always believed that when a man was working hard for his family, the best thing a wife could do was trust and support him. That's why today she wanted to give him a little surprise, a way of saying, "I'm always here for you." When Jacob woke up, the smell of food filled the condo. He walked into the Braver kitchen, a little surprised to see the table set more elaborately than usual. "What's the special occasion?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. Evelyn just smiled, handing him a mug of coffee. "Nothing. Just wanted you to have a good day." Jacob nodded, but a fleeting thought crossed his eyes, one that Evelyn didn't catch. Breakfast was quick. He was in his usual rush to get ready for work. Before leaving, he turned back and gently ruffled her hair. "I might be late. Tonight. I have a meeting with a client." Evelyn nodded, her familiar smile in place. "It's okay, just focus on your work." The door clicked shut, leaving a quiet stillness in the condo. Evelyn cleaned up, and then sat on the sofa in the living room. For some reason, Jacob's words made her pause. "I might be late tonight." That phrase had become more common lately, but she quickly shook her head, telling herself she was overthinking. His job was demanding. It was normal. She shouldn't be suspicious. But right then, a spontaneous idea popped into her head. What if she went to pick him up today? The thought surprised even her. She had never done that before. Not because she didn't want to, but because she believed everyone needed their own space. But today, for some reason, she wanted to break that routine. Maybe she wanted to create a surprise. Maybe she missed the thrill of doing something special for the person she loved. Or maybe it was because of a vague feeling she couldn't yet name. Evelyn stood up and went to her closet. She chose a simple but elegant dress, one that Jacob had once told her looked perfect on her. Then, she took a small box from a drawer. Inside was a watch she had bought a few days ago, intended to give it to him on a special occasion. But now, she decided to give it to him, today. He'll be so surprised, she whispered to herself, a gentle joy bubbling up inside her. The afternoon passed more quickly than she expected. After finishing her work, Evelyn took her time getting ready. She applied light makeup, fixed her hair, and looked at herself in the mirror. Not to impress, but to feel more confident, standing before the man she loved. Before leaving, she grabbed the gift-wrapped box, her heart full of anticipation. The drive to Jacob's office wasn't long, but today every minute felt stretched. As she drove, she imagined his reaction when he saw her standing at the entrance. He'd probably be surprised, then smile, maybe even pull her into a tight hug. Thinking about it, Evelyn instinctively squeezed the box in her hand, as if holding on to her happiness. But mixed in with all those feelings, there was something else, a tiny, faint thread of unease running through her thoughts. It wasn't a clear feeling, not strong enough to be called worry, but not light enough to be ignored. Had she ever felt this premonition before? Maybe, but she had never let it affect her, because she believed. She believed in Jacob, in their marriage, and in the idea that good things don't just disappear. When her car pulled up in front of the high-rise where Jacob worked, Evelyn took a deep breath. She looked up at the glass panes reflecting the sunset and smiled. "It's just a surprise," she told herself. She got out of the car, her hand still clutching the box, each step filled with a nervous excitement she couldn't hide. She didn't know that in just a few minutes, everything in her life was about to change completely. But right now, Evelyn was still a woman full of hope, still believing that a happy moment awaited her, and completely unprepared for the opposite. A truth that, once seen, would shatter everything she had ever believed in. As Evelyn walked into the building's lobby, the soft golden light from the ceiling reflected off the polished marble floor, creating a familiar, elegant atmosphere. She had been here a few times before, but never with this feeling. She approached the reception desk with a small smile. "Excuse me, has Jacob's department finished for the day?" The receptionist glanced at a screen and replied, "Yes, their meeting just ended. They should be coming down soon." Evelyn nodded her thanks and stepped back, choosing a spot near the main flight entrance. From there, she could see everyone who came out. She didn't want to call him. She wanted the surprise to be perfect, to see his genuine reaction when he saw her. Time passed slowly, each minute feeling longer than the last. She stood there, her hand still holding the small box, her heart pounding with a nervous rhythm. A stream of people began to exit the elevators. Groups of colleagues laughed and said their goodbyes before dispersing. Evelyn's eyes scanned each face, searching for the familiar one. And then she saw him. Jacob stepped out of the elevator, looking the same as always, a crisp, button-down shirt, a confident stride. But what made Evelyn freeze wasn't him. It was the person walking beside him, Mia. For a split second, Evelyn thought she was mistaken, because Mia didn't work here. She had no reason to be with Jacob at the end of the workday. But no, it was unmistakably Mia. She wore a fitted dress, her makeup subtle but refined. She was laughing, a kind of laugh Evelyn had never seen when they were together. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat, but she remained motionless. It could be a coincidence, she told herself. Maybe they just ran into each other. It's just a coincidence. But all those rationalizations were obliterated in the next few seconds. Jacob stopped just inside the entrance, and Mia stopped with him. There was no distance between them, no sense of professional boundaries. And then he reached out and pulled her closer. It wasn't a friendly hug, not the kind you give a friend you haven't seen in a while. It was a tight, possessive embrace. So natural and familiar, it was clear. It wasn't the first time. Mia's hands rested on his shoulders, her face nestled against his chest. Jacob leaned down and whispered something Evelyn couldn't hear, but the expression on his face was terrifyingly clear. That wasn't the look of a friend, nor was it simple concern. It was the look Evelyn once thought was reserved only for her. In that instant, all the sounds around her seemed to vanish. The chatter of people, the footsteps on the marble, everything disappeared, leaving only the image in front of her, replaying in her mind like a slow-motion film. Her hand clenched the gift box so tightly her knuckles turned white. But strangely, She didn't step forward. She didn't call his name. She didn't make a scene like anyone else would have. She just stood there, watching, and felt a distinct sensation spread through her chest. Not a sharp, overwhelming pain, but a numbing coldness. It was the feeling you get when you finally realize a truth you had never even considered. And right then, Evelyn slowly lowered her hand and took out her phone. She wasn't shaking, wasn't rushing. She calmly opened the camera and recorded every w.com gesture, every look, every moment that she knew would change everything. The tiny lens reflected the scene before her. Jacob still hadn't noticed her presence. Neither had Mia. They were still lost in their own world. A world without Evelyn. When the video was finished, she turned off the screen, took a deep breath, and slowly turned around. Not a single word, not a single tear, not a single expression to show what she had just witnessed. But deep inside, something had irrevocably changed. Her steps were steady as she walked out of the building, evenly paced, not too fast, not too slow, as if she were walking away from a place that no longer belonged to her. As the glass doors closed behind her, the setting sun cast a painter's glow on her face, but this time her smile was gone. In its place was a gaze so still it was frightening, because Evelyn now understood one thing. Some truths, once seen, can never be unseen. But in that very same moment, she made a decision. A decision that would later make both Jacob and Mia remember this day for the rest of their lives. Not with tears, but with a price they never saw coming. The drive home that day felt longer than ever. Streetlights streaked across the grand car window, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow on Evelyn's face, but her eyes remained unnervingly calm. If this had been the old her, she might have been crying, calling him, demanding answers, doing everything a betrayed wife is expected to do. But not the Evelyn of this moment. She was just silent. It was a silence born not of weakness but of thought. Every detail of what she'd just seen was crystal clear in her mind. That hug wasn't a first. That look couldn't be faked. And the thing that chilled her to the bone was how natural they were. So natural they had no fear of being discovered. That could only mean one thing. This had been going on for a long time. When the car stopped in front of their condo, Evelyn didn't get out right away. She sat for a few seconds and replayed the video she had just taken. The screen lit up, showing the scene again, but this time she no longer felt shock. Instead, she watched it like an outsider calmly, clearly, separating emotion from logic. She slowed down the video, examining every detail, the way Jacob's hand rested on Mia's back, the way Mia tilted her head, the way they stood so close without a hint of hesitation. It all pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't a one-time mistake. Evelyn turned off the screen, took a deep breath, and whispered a single word, so soft but so clear. Done. That one word marked a complete transformation. When she walked into their home, everything was the same. The familiar room, the familiar sofa, the familiar scent, but the feeling was gone. Evelyn put down her bag, took off her shoes, and went to the kitchen. She started preparing dinner, just like any other day. Her movements were smooth and tidy, with no hint of haste or disarray, as if nothing had happened. About an hour later, the sound of the door opening broke the silence. Jacob walked in, looking the same as always. He took off his coat, set down his bag, and glanced toward the kitchen. "You're home," Evelyn said, turning to smile at him. "You're back. Was it a long day?" Her voice was so normal that no one could have detected a thing. Jacob paused for a second, not because he was suspicious, but because he was. Surprised she was still so gentle. "Just the usual. The meeting ran a little late," he replied, his eyes briefly avoiding hers. Evelyn nodded without asking any more questions, simply turning back to the stove. The silence between them wasn't tense, but it was different. During dinner, Evelyn chatted as she normally would. She talked about her work, a new client, and other small things from her day. Jacob responded, but his gaze would occasionally drift toward her, as if trying to find something. But he found nothing because Evelyn revealed no signs. After dinner, while Jacob was in the shower, Evelyn sat in the living room. She picked up her phone, replayed the video one more time, and saved it to a private folder she named, simply, Evidence. Then, she did something she had never done before. She opened her contacts and found Mia's name. Her finger hovered over the screen for a moment before she pressed call. The phone rang. Hello, Mia? Evelyn's voice was as warm and friendly as ever. Yeah, it's me. What's up? Mia's reply was completely casual. Evelyn laughed softly. Nothing. Just realized it's been a while. Are you free? For coffee tomorrow? On the other end, Mia hesitated for a fraction of a second before quickly agreeing. Yeah, sure. I'm free tomorrow. Let's meet then. Evelyn ended the call. The look in her eyes was no longer that of a friend. When Jacob came out of the shower, he saw Evelyn still sitting there. You're not in bed yet? He asked. Just waiting for you. She stood up, walked over to him, and unexpectedly gave him a light hug. Jacob stiffened. For a moment, he didn't know how to react. What's this for? He asked, his voice a little strained. Evelyn said softly, Nothing. I just felt like hugging you tonight. She let go, smiling as if nothing was wrong, but in her heart everything was different. That hug was no longer pure love. It was a goodbye that Jacob hadn't even realized was happening. That night, lying next to each other, Jacob fell asleep quickly, but Evelyn's eyes remained open. She stared at the ceiling, her expression unreadable. Her mind was no longer filled with the question of why, but with what's next. And then, very slowly, a plan began to form, not rushed, not emotional, but step by step, clear, precise. Because Evelyn understood one thing. What she had just seen wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And this time, she wouldn't be a passive observer. She would be the one to decide the end of this story, an ending that both of them would remember forever. The next morning, the sun streamed through the blinds just like any other day, but Evelyn was not the woman she had been yesterday. She woke up early and glanced at the man sleeping soundly beside her, his face as peaceful as if he'd never done anything wrong. In that moment, Evelyn just looked at him, her gaze, no longer warm, no longer pained, just filled with a chilling calm. She quietly got out of bed and began a new day, a day she knew would be an act. Breakfast was prepared as usual, everything so perfect that no one could have noticed a difference. When Jacob came downstairs, Evelyn was still smiling. You slept in a little today. Her voice was light and natural, without a hint of strain. Jacob sat down, looked at her for a moment, and said, I was a little tired last night. Evelyn nodded, placing a mug of coffee in front of him. Well, make sure you get some rest tonight. Don't overwork yourself. That comment made Jacob pause. He looked at her a little longer, as if trying to read something in her eyes. But he saw nothing, because Evelyn had hidden it all, too perfectly. After breakfast, as Jacob was about to leave, Evelyn suddenly called out, Will, do you be home early tonight? Probably have to work late again, he answered, his tone slightly evasive. Evelyn just nodded. Okay, drive safe. No more questions, no suspicion, no blame. It was that very normality that made Jacob feel like something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The door closed, and Evelyn stood still for a moment before turning back inside. The smile on her face vanished, replaced by a sharp, cold look. She opened her phone, watched the video one more time, then moved it to a secure folder. After that, she found Mia's name in her contacts. The text had been scheduled the night before. 3 p.m., our old coffee spot. Evelyn put down her phone and took a deep breath. Today was the first step. That afternoon, Evelyn arrived at the coffee shop early. She chose a familiar corner, a table where she and Mia had once spent hours talking and laughing. But today, the feeling was completely different. There was no intimacy, no trust, only a meeting with a purpose. Mia arrived about 10 minutes later, with the same familiar look, the same gentle smile, the same friendly voice. "Have you been waiting long?" "No, I just got here," Evelyn replied, her expression neutral. They ordered drinks, and the atmosphere was initially just like their previous meetings. Mia talked about her job and trivial matters, while Evelyn listened, occasionally nodding. To an outsider, no one would have guessed that a massive secret lay between them. After a while, Evelyn took the lead. "I've been thinking about expanding my business lately." Mia immediately perked up. "Really? What are you planning?" Evelyn smiled. "Just a small project, but if it goes well, the returns could be pretty good." A flicker of light appeared in Mia's eyes, a tiny change, but one Evelyn didn't miss. "I'm looking for a partner," Evelyn continued, her voice light as if it were a casual thought. Mia leaned forward. "You mean, if you're interested, I could let you in on it." The mood shifted instantly. Mia was silent for a few seconds, seemingly weighing her options, but in reality she was calculating. "That sounds interesting," she said, her voice calm but unable to hide her interest. Evelyn looked her straight in the eye, her smile unwavering. "I trust you. I wouldn't feel comfortable with an outsider." That sentence in the past would have surely touched Mia, but now it just sounded convenient. "In that case, I'd like to give it a try," Mia said, a hint of ambition in her eyes. Evelyn nodded. "Great. I'll send you the details later." The conversation continued for a little longer, but the objective had been achieved. Completely unaware that she had just walked into a trap. As for Evelyn, when she turned to leave, her eyes grew colder than ever. That evening, when Jacob returned, everything proceeded as usual. Evelyn cooked, chatted, and showed concern. But one thing had changed. She was no longer the Eva daughter de Dr. wife who simply trusted. She was the one in control. When Jacob sat down at the dinner table, he found himself looking at her a little longer than usual. "You seem happy today," he asked. Evelyn smiled. "Yeah, I have a new plan." "What kind of plan?" "Just business. Nothing special," she replied lightly, changing the subject. Jacob didn't press further, but a strange feeling settled in his gut. He had no idea that things were slowly slipping out of his control. Later that night, as they lay next to each other, Evelyn closed her eyes but didn't sleep. In her mind, every step was clearly laid out. Mia had taken the bait. Jacob would be next. And this time, Evelyn was no longer an observer. She was the one writing this play, a play where when the curtain fell, no one would, to be able to go back to the way things were. In the days that followed, everything unfolded just as Evelyn had predicted. Mia began contacting her more frequently, no longer with casual texts, but with the barrage of messages filled with an interest that bordered on impatient. "Have you thought through the project yet? When does it start? I can transfer the bling. Money now if you need it. Send me the info, I want to look it over." Evelyn read each message, a faint smirk playing on her lips. In the past, she would have been happy that her best friend was interested in her work, but now, every word exposed a haste and calculation she had never noticed before. She didn't reply immediately. She made Mia wait one day, then two, until the impatience on the other end was almost palpable. That evening, Evelyn finally texted back. "I'm just finalizing the plan. Let's meet tomorrow." A few seconds later, her phone buzzed. "Okay, I'm free all day tomorrow." The response was so fast it was clear there was no hesitation. Evelyn set her phone down, her gaze hardening. She knew one thing for sure: the fish had started to bite. But she was in no hurry. To pull someone down, you have to let them walk to the edge of the cliff themselves. The next day, Evelyn didn't meet Mia right away. Instead, she started on something else, an investigation. Not in a loud, obvious way, but quietly. She contacted an old friend who worked in finance and asked for a background check on Mia. Initially, Evelyn only expected to find a few red flags, but what she got back was far beyond her imagination. Mia was in debt, not just a small amount, but multiple loans scattered across banks and private lenders. She had no stable job, yet her spending habits far exceeded her income. And most notably, in the past, she'd had an affair with a married man. When Evelyn read that last part, her hand tightened slightly, not out of surprise, but because everything was starting to fit together. All the times Mia had complained about her difficult life, the times she needed money urgently, the times she showed up just when Jacob was out. It was no coincidence. Evelyn closed the screen and sat in silence for a moment. A very clear feeling rose within her, no longer pain, but absolute clarity. She understood now. Mia wasn't just betraying her. She had a motive. That afternoon, Evelyn arrived at their meeting spot. Mia was already there, a hint of tension on her face, but it was quickly replaced by her usual smile when she saw Evelyn. "You're here." "Yeah," Evelyn said, sitting down and placing her bag beside her, her expression unriadable. After a few pleasantries, Mia couldn't hide her eagerness. "So, how's the project you mentioned?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She opened her bag, pulled out a file folder, and placed it on the table. "Here's the preliminary plan." Mia quickly grabbed it, flipping through the pages. Her eyes lit up when she saw the projected profit margins, all clearly calculated. "The returns are this." "High?" Evelyn nodded. "If we do it right, they could be even higher." Mia was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "How much capital is needed?" "Not too much, but I need someone I can trust." Evelyn looked her straight in, the eye, her voice soft but firm. "I only want to do this with someone I trust." This time, that statement didn't carry the weight of friendship. It felt more like a carefully laid trap. Mia looked up, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "If that's the case, I'm in." "Are you sure?" "Yes." The answer was swift, without a trace of doubt. Evelyn smiled, but her eyes remained unchanged. She had seen what she needed to see. Greed. When the conversation ended, Mia left with an excitement she couldn't conceal. Evelyn, however, remained seated alone, slowly gathering her documents. Everything was going according to plan, but this was only half of it. That evening, when Jacob returned home, he was his usual self. But one thing was different. He watched Evelyn more closely. "Did you go out today?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. "Yeah, I met up with Mia," Evelyn answered naturally. Jacob froze for a second, then followed up. "Anything wrong?" "No, just talking business," she replied, then turned to him. "Why?" "No reason," Jacob said, shaking his head, but it was clear he was thinking. Evelyn looked at him for a second, then smiled. "If you have something to ask, just say it. I just feel like you've been busier lately." "Well, that's work for you." A simple answer, but it was enough to end the conversation. Jacob didn't ask anything else, but an unsettling feeling began to grow inside him. He didn't realize that he, too, was slowly being drawn into the play Evelyn had set up. That night, lying in the dark, Evelyn opened her phone and reviewed all the information on Mia. Every detail, every number, every connection was neatly organized. She didn't need to guess anymore. She knew exactly who she was dealing with. And more importantly, she knew what to do next, because for someone like Mia, there was only one thing needed to control her: money. Evelyn closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. The game was just getting started. After their meeting, things began to move faster, just as Evelyn had hoped. Mia no longer maintained her facade of calm composure. She started texting and calling constantly about the project, her enthusiasm almost frantic. "Have you finalized the numbers? When can we start? I can transfer my investment right away." The relentless messages only confirmed Evelyn's suspicions. A real partner would ask about the plan, the risks, the growth strategy. Mia was only interested in one thing: profit, and that was her greatest weakness. Evelyn didn't rush to reply. She deliberately created distance, responding slowly, as if she were still carefully considering everything. This only made Mia more anxious. 3 days later, Evelyn finally initiated another meeting. This time, she chose a quieter cafe with fewer people. When Mia arrived, her eyes were filled with anticipation. "You called me so." "Suddenly. Must be good news." Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She pulled a thicker file from her bag and placed it on the table. I've completed the plan. Mia snatched it up, her fingers flying through the pages. The numbers were clear, logical, and accompanied by tantalizing profit projections. Everything was meticulously prepared by Evelyn not to deceive, but to inspire absolute confidence. If we invest at the right time, we could triple the return in 3 months, Evelyn said, her voice steady. Mia looked up, her eyes shining with undisguised greed. Is that really possible? I wouldn't propose it if I wasn't sure. A short but powerful reply. Mia was silent for a few seconds, clearly doing the math in her head. How much capital? It depends on how much you want to commit, Evelyn said, looking her straight in the eye. But I need a commitment. What kind of commitment? No pulling out midway, and all transactions have to be officially in your name. Mia flinched slightly. That condition made her hesitate, but only for a moment. The hesitation was quickly overwhelmed by greed. Okay, I agree. Evelyn gave a slight nod, as if she had expected it. Then I'll prepare the contract. Mia nodded eagerly, her eyes bright. The sooner, the better. When the meeting ended, Mia left with obvious excitement. Evelyn, however, stayed for a while longer, slowly sipping her coffee. She was in no hurry. Everything was falling into place. But this trap wasn't just for Mia. That evening, when Jacob got home, Evelyn was, as usual, at her desk. Her laptop was open, the screen filled with complex spreadsheets. What are you working on? Jacob asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. A new project, Evelyn replied without looking up, her fingers still typing. Look serious. It is. If it succeeds, the profit will be substantial. That statement caught Jacob's attention. He walked closer, looking over her, the shoulder at the screen. The figures displayed were surprisingly large. I've been working on this for long? Just started, Evelyn answered, then turned to him. What do you think? Jacob was silent for a few seconds. Working in marketing, he wasn't a finance expert, but the numbers in front of him were enough to show this was no small venture. It looks pretty good if it's real, he said. Evelyn smiled faintly. I'm looking for a partner. Have you found someone? One person. The answer made Jacob pause. Who? Mia. The name hung in the air for a silent second, but Evelyn saw it all. She looked directly at him, as if waiting for his reaction. Jacob quickly regained his composure. Oh. Well, that's good. You two are close. Yes, Evelyn agreed, then added, but I still want one more person. You mean, you. Just one word, but it was enough to make Jacob freeze. Me? Yes, Evelyn said, her expression unreadable. I'd feel more secure if you were involved. Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at her, trying to figure out what she was thinking, but there was nothing. No suspicion, no hidden meaning, just a straightforward proposal. I'm not really an expert in this stuff, he said, his voice hesitant. You don't need to be. I'll handle that part, Evelyn replied. You would just need to be a signatory on some of the accounts. That last sentence was the key. Jacob fell silent, his mind racing. If this project was as profitable as it seemed, this was a huge opportunity. And more importantly, if Mia was already in. He didn't realize he was being pulled into a vortex. I'll think about it, he finally said. Evelyn nodded, not pushing. Okay, take your time. She turned back to her screen as if the conversation was over, but in her mind, everything was clear. Mia had taken the bait. Jacob was beginning to waver. And most importantly, neither of them realized they were walking into the exact same trap. A trap designed not to hold them, but to ensure they couldn't escape once they were inside. That night, as the city lights twinkled outside her window, Evelyn stood in the quiet of her home. There was no hesitation left in her eyes. She knew the first phase was complete, and from here on out, there was no stopping. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in Evelyn's home remained superficially calm. But for Jacob, something was shifting that he couldn't quite name. It wasn't Evelyn's actions. She was still gentle, attentive, and the perfect wife. In fact, It was her very perfection that made him uneasy. That morning, as he was getting ready for work, Jacob happened to see the Times-graded project file on Evelyn's desk. The numbers, charts, and investment plans were laid out with a professionalism that surprised him. He picked it up and skimmed to a few pages. The more he read, the harder it was to put down, not because he understood everything, but because he realized that if the projections were even half true, the returns would be significant. Find something interesting? Evelyn's voice came from behind him. Jacob flinched slightly and put the file down. Oh, just taking a look. Evelyn walked over, a small smile on her face. And? It seems promising, he admitted, his eyes still lingering on the papers. If you decide to join, I'll adjust the shares accordingly, she said, her tone completely casual, as if it were just a normal offer. Jacob didn't reply immediately. His mind wasn't just on the project, it was on Mia. The previous night, Mia had texted him not long, rambling messages, but a few short, pointed sentences that had stuck with him. Evelyn's project looks solid. If it's real, we shouldn't miss out. Are you in? The questions, though seemingly innocent, made him feel cornered. I'll think about it, he finally said, the same answer as before. Evelyn just nodded, applying no pressure. But it was her lack of urgency that made it harder for Jacob to dismiss. As he left the house, his mind was no longer on his job. On his way to the Juan Brashen's 5 Lear 7 office, he kept thinking about the project, the profits, and the regret he might feel if he missed out. And then he thought of Mia. Around noon, he got a text from her. Free for a few? I'm near your office. Jacob hesitated for a moment but replied anyway. Yeah, I'll come down. They met at a nearby coffee shop. Mia looked different today, more polished, confident, and proactive than before. You've been busy, she said, her voice soft. Just work, Jacob replied, his gaze drifting away. Mia didn't beat around the bush. The project. What are you thinking? Jacob was silent for a few seconds. I'm still considering it. Considering what? Mia leaned forward slightly, her voice low. Opportunities. Like this don't come around often. Her words hit a nerve. How much are you planning to invest? He asked. Mia smiled. Depends on you. A vague but leading answer. If you're in, I'll follow. Jacob looked at her, a strange feeling rising within him. It wasn't quite affection, but more like a secret bond between them, something that shouldn't exist but was becoming clearer every day. I'm not sure, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. What are you worried about? Mia asked, her eyes fixed on him. Jacob didn't answer. He couldn't say he was worried about Evelyn, because in his mind, Evelyn was still the perfect, unsuspecting wife, and that very fact made for Mesa's make him feel even more pressure. If you don't want to, that's fine, Mia said, suddenly pulling back, her tone lighter. I just thought it would be good if we could do it together. That strategic retreat made Jacob waver even more. It's not that I don't want to, he said quickly. Mia just looked at him, saying nothing. I just need some time. Okay, she nodded, but a different kind of glint flashed in her eyes, one that Jacob didn't notice. The meeting ended quickly, but its effect lingered. Back at the office that afternoon, Jacob couldn't focus. The numbers from the file, Mia's words, and Evelyn's calm demeanor all swirled in his head. When he got home that evening, he found Evelyn in the living room, her laptop open as usual, the screen casting a calm, almost cold light on her face. You're back, she said without looking up. Yeah, Jacob replied, sitting down across from her. A brief silence passed. Have you thought about it? Evelyn asked softly. Jacob looked at her. There was no pressure, no urgency, but that in itself made him feel like he was being placed in a position with no way out. I'm in, he finally said. A decision made not from certainty, but from indecision. Evelyn gave a tiny nod. Okay, I'll prepare your part of the agreement. No. Excitement, no surprise. As if she had known his answer all along. Jacob watched her for a moment, then asked, You're not going to ask any questions? Like what? Like why I agreed? Evelyn smiled. You have your reasons. That answer left Jacob speechless. But a strange feeling started to spread. Through him, not relief but unease. Later that night, when the condo was quiet, Evelyn sat alone in her home office. On the screen were 3 names: Mia, Jacob, and herself. 3 people, 1 plan. The trap was now closed. Evelyn clicked the mouse, saving the final version of the file. Her eyes were still, but deep inside, the calculations were complete. Because the moment Jacob said, "I'm in," he had sealed his own fate. Things accelerated the moment Jacob officially agreed to participate. Evelyn showed no signs of haste. Instead, she executed each step slowly, deliberately, and with cold precision. That morning, she placed a meticulously prepared contract in front of him. Every clause was clear, so detailed it was impossible to find fault. "Read it over carefully before you sign," she said, her voice as gentle as ever. Jacob picked it up, flipping through the pages. The terms regarding capital, contribution, benefits, and responsibilities were all reasonable. There was nothing unusual, or at least not to someone who didn't understand the fine print. "What's this part about being the primary signatory?" he asked, pausing at a small section. "It's to streamline transactions," Evelyn replied instantly. "Some accounts require a direct signatory. It'll be easier if you handle it." Jacob nodded slightly. He didn't think much of it. In his mind, there was only one thing. This was an opportunity, one that might not come again. After a few minutes, he signed his name. At that very moment, a critical link in the chain was locked. That afternoon, Evelyn sent a similar contract to Mia. As expected, Mia barely read it. She was only focused on the profit figures at the end of the plan. "I'll transfer the money now." The text came almost immediately. "Okay, use the account number in the contract," Evelyn replied succinctly. Within 2 hours, the money was transferred. It was a significant sum. Evelyn looked at the notification, her expression unchanging. Everything was proceeding as planned. But the next step was even more important. That evening, Jacob received a text from Mia. "I've sent the money. What about you?" Jacob stared at the screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He hadn't transferred his share yet, not because he didn't want to, but because a sliver of doubt remained. That doubt was quickly dispelled by Mia's next message. "The sooner we're in, the higher the returns." That single sentence was enough to make his decision. He opened his banking app and initiated the transfer. The money left his account quickly, but a strange feeling washed over him, not anxiety, but an odd thrill, like placing a large bet. When the transfer successful notification popped up, Jacob let out a soft breath. He had no idea he had just stepped into the very center of the trap. In the following days, Evelyn began to operate the project. She sent out regular updates and progress reports, complete with initial growth figures. Everything looked legitimate, even more promising than expected. Mia grew increasingly excited. "We're already seeing profits? This fast? Should I invest more?" Her rapid-fire questions proved one thing: she was completely hooked. Jacob felt the same. He began to feel his decision was the right one. His initial doubts faded, replaced by high expectations. But only Evelyn knew the truth. The numbers weren't wrong, but they were just the tip of the iceberg. The part submerged beneath the surface was what she controlled. A week later, Evelyn organized a small meeting under the guise of a live progress update. Mia arrived early, her face beaming with eagerness. Jacob came later, but the look in his eyes had changed. The hesitation was gone, replaced by genuine interest. "Things seem to be going well," he said, sitting down next to Evelyn. "The initial phase is stable," she replied calmly. The meeting went smoothly. Evelyn presented each step and the future plans with clarity. Everything was logical, reasonable, with no room for suspicion. "We could increase our capital at this stage," she mentioned, as if it were a casual suggestion. Mia reacted instantly. "I can add more." Jacob glanced at her, then back at Evelyn. A new thought began to form in his mind. If he was already invested, he might as well go bigger. But this time he didn't answer immediately. "I'll review it," he said. Evelyn nodded, not pushing, but her eyes registered everything. The meeting ended. Mia left in a state of euphoria. Jacob did too, though a Brian of the readender.com, small, undefined feeling lingered in his mind. When he got home, he paused at the door for a moment before entering. Evelyn was sitting in the living room, as usual. "How did it go today?" she asked. "Good," he replied, sitting across from her. A short silence followed. "Do you think we should invest more?" Jacob asked. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze steady. "That's up to you. If you believe in it, then do it." The simple answer placed the entire decision in his hands. Jacob said nothing more, but inside, a shift had occurred. He was no longer on the sidelines. He had stepped in, and the deeper he went, the harder it would be to turn back. That night, after Jacob was asleep, Evelyn opened her laptop. The screen displayed all the cash flows, contracts, and data. She scanned the numbers, every move perfectly calculated. Everything was locked in. She clicked the mouse, saving the day's final update. Her expression was emotionless because she knew the trap was complete. All she had to do now was wait for it all to collapse on its own. After that meeting, things were no longer an experiment. Both Mia and Jacob were fully caught in the vortex of rising numbers and profit projections that Evelyn had so perfectly constructed. The daily reports she sent were beautiful, enough to make anyone believe they were on the right track and, more importantly, that they were on the verge of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Mia's reaction was the most obvious. She no longer hid her excitement, constantly contacting Evelyn. Her tone completely changed. "Is it too late to add more capital? Is this the best time? I don't want to miss out." Her insistent questions repeated day after day. Evelyn read each message, her eyes growing a blonde fraction colder, not because she was surprised, but because everything was happening exactly as she'd predicted. When people see a potential gain, they push themselves further. And Mia was doing it effortlessly. But this time, Evelyn didn't reply right away. She left a gap, just long enough to make the other party impatient. That evening, she finally texted back. "It's possible, but the risk is also higher." The answer was short, non-committal, but its vagueness only served to excite Mia more. "I'll take the risk." The reply came almost instantly. Evelyn stared at the screen, a ghost of a smile on her lips. That was exactly what she needed to hear. Meanwhile, Jacob was also changing. Where he had once been hesitant, that hesitation was fading. The initial returns had made him a believer, and more importantly, he felt he was holding a major opportunity in his hands. That evening at dinner, he brought it up unexpectedly. "What do you think about increasing our investment?" Evelyn remained as calm as ever. "You want to? I just think if we're going to do it, we should go bigger." She didn't answer right away, just calmly served herself some food before Slashley's, saying, "Going bigger means accepting bigger risks." "I understand," Jacob replied, but his eyes showed none of the hesitation his words might imply. Evelyn looked at him for a second, then gave a slight nod. "If you've decided, I'll make the adjustments." No arguments, no advice. Her easy agreement only made Jacob more certain he was on the right path. But he didn't realize he was taking another step deeper into the trap. The next day, Mia arranged to meet Jacob privately. No longer going through. Evelyn, no longer maintaining any distance. When they sat across from each other, the air between them had changed. The initial caution was gone, replaced by a secret intimacy built on their shared venture. "Have you decided?" Mia asked bluntly. "I'm thinking about it." "What's there to think about?" She leaned toward him, her voice low. An opportunity like this doesn't come around twice." It was the same line she used before, but this time it carried a different weight, because now Jacob believed. "How much are you adding?" he asked. Mia didn't answer right away. She looked at him for a moment, then said slowly, "If you do it, I'll follow." A simple sentence, but it was a clear manipulation. This was no longer just about money. It was about tying their fates together. Jacob was silent. His mind was filled not just with numbers, but with the feeling of sharing a secret with someone else, a feeling he never thought he would have. "I'll increase it," he finally said. Mia smiled, a smile that no longer held anything back. When they left the cafe, they both thought they were in a position of power. Meanwhile, Evelyn knew everything. That evening, when Jacob got home, he announced his decision. "I've decided to increase the investment." Evelyn showed no surprise. "How much?" "Double the current amount." She gave a tiny nod. "Okay, I'll prepare the paperwork. No questions, no objections." Her placid reaction made it impossible for Jacob to read her, but that only pushed him forward. Late that night, Evelyn sat alone in front of her screen. The new numbers were updated. The cash flow had increased, and so had the level of entanglement. She looked at their names, Jacob and Mia, placed side by side in the same system. A coincidence or an inevitable outcome? Evelyn clicked the mouse, finalizing the last update. Her eyes were unwavering. She knew their greed was now fully exposed. And when people are led by greed, they walk themselves to a place from which they can never return. The game had reached a point of no return, and this time, no one would walk away unscathed. Everything had reached the point Evelyn had been waiting for. It was no longer about suspicion or speculation, but about clear, layered evidence, enough to make denial impossible. But she wasn't in a hurry. She understood that the most effective blow isn't the fastest, but the one delivered at the perfect moment. That evening, Evelyn called both sets of parents. The reason was simple. "It's been a while since we all got together. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend?" Her voice was light and natural. No one would suspect a thing. Jacob overheard and thought nothing of it, even feeling a sense of relief. If Evelyn had discovered something, she could never be this calm. That thought made him let his guard down completely. 2 days later, the house was filled with people. Both sets of parents were dating's there, and the atmosphere was initially warm and cheerful. Evelyn had prepared everything perfectly, from the food to the table settings. She was still the plains, perfect daughter-in-law in everyone's eyes. Jacob sat beside her, glancing at her occasionally, a strange feeling in his gut. He didn't know why, but Evelyn's eyes seemed different today, still gentle but too calm, unnervingly so. As dinner was winding down, Evelyn gently set her utensils down. "I have something I'd like to say." The words quieted the table. No one thought it was anything serious until Evelyn stood up, phone in hand. She didn't look at Jacob, nor at Mia, who had been invited as a close family friend. She simply opened her screen and connected it to the living room TV. "Before I say anything, I think everyone should see this." The screen lit up, and the video began to play. The image was clear, unedited. Jacob and Mia, standing in front of his office building. And then, the embrace. No one spoke. The air froze. Both sets of parents stared at the screen, disbelieving. When the video ended, the silence stretched on. Finally, Jacob's mother spoke, her voice trembling. "What is this?" No one answered. The answer was already too clear. Jacob's face had gone pale. He shot up from his chair. "Evelyn, you." He couldn't finish, because Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes no longer those of a wife. "You were saying?" she asked, her voice chillingly calm. Mia also stood, but she didn't dare look at anyone. I can explain." She stammered. Evelyn let out a small, cold laugh. "Explain?" She took a step forward, her gaze shifting to Mia. "Explain the hug? Or explain everything that came after?" That question made Mia freeze and silenced Jacob completely. But Evelyn wasn't done. She picked up her phone again. If it were just this, it might be called a misunderstanding. The screen lit up again. This time, it wasn't a video, but screenshots of text, messages. The lines of conversation were crystal clear. No explanation was needed. Reading them was enough to understand. The atmosphere in the room was now suffocating. Evelyn's mother placed a hand on the table. Her voice choked. "Jacob, how long? Has this been going on?" No answer. Jacob stood there as if frozen in time. Every excuse, every justification was rendered meaningless by the evidence on display. He started, but stopped. He didn't even know what to say. Mia had lost all her composure. "I didn't mean for this to happen." It's not what you think, she pleaded, but her voice lacked conviction. Evelyn looked at her, her gaze now sharp. Not what I think? She took another step closer. Then what is it? No one could answer. There was no answer. Evelyn stood tall, looking at everyone. In the room, then said slowly, I didn't make a scene. Not because I didn't. No. That sentence silenced the room, but because I wanted everything to be clear. She turned to Jacob. You can lie to me, but you can't lie to everyone. Then she looked at Mia. And you didn't just betray one person. Nothing more needed to be said. Jacob finally collapsed, all pretense of composure gone. Evelyn, I'm sorry, but the apology was far too late. Evelyn didn't respond. She just stood there, her expression unreadable. What she wanted wasn't an apology, but for the truth to be exposed. And now it had been. There was no more hiding, no more pretending, and no way back. The evening didn't end as a family dinner, but as a complete collapse. And at Persinder Ligon, the center of it all was Evelyn, the only one who never lost control. Because everything that happened was part of her plan. After that night, the once peaceful home became suffocating. The laughter and warm meals were replaced by long silences and averted gazes. Jacob sat alone in the living room, his mind a complete blank. Everything had happened so fast that, before he could process it, his life had been laid bare in front of both their families. There was no way to hide, no chance to explain. Everything he had tried to maintain had crumbled in a single evening. His phone buzzed incessantly, texts from colleagues, friends, and acquaintances. No one said it directly, but everyone knew. A short video, a few photos, a couple of text threads, it was enough to spread faster than he could have imagined. The reputation he had spent years building was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, Mia fell into a different state. At first, she tried to call Jacob, to find a way to talk, but when he didn't respond, her attitude shifted. Instantly. Her messages became cold, then stopped altogether. She disappeared, stopped asking questions, as if they had never been connected. For Mia, when the Parsendin Nines owed, benefits were gone. Everything else was too. But the real blow had yet to fall. 3 days later, Jacob received a notice from his bank. A large transaction had been temporarily frozen for review. He initially thought it was a technical issue, but the response he got when he called left him stunned. The investment you're involved in is currently under review for potential financial.com. Irregularities. All related funds have been temporarily frozen. His ears were ringing. But this is a legitimate project, he said, his voice losing its certainty. We are just following standard review protocols, came the cold, impersonal reply. Jacob hung up, his hand trembling. It was only then that he began to realize things weren't as simple as he thought. He immediately called Mia. This time, she answered. What is it? Her voice was no longer gentle. Do you know about the money being frozen? I know. So what are you going to do? A short silence. Then Mia's voice came back, blunt and final. You're the primary signatory. You deal with it. Her words hit him like a physical blow. What did you say? I said what I said, she retorted, without a shred of hesitation. I just contributed money. You were the one who signed all the paperwork. Jacob stood motionless. He suddenly remembered every clause in the contract, the James OS lines he had skimmed over, the for convenient signatory role that Evelyn had mentioned. It all became terrifyingly clear. Mia, you can't. Don't call me again. She cut him off. This has nothing to do with me. The line went dead. Jacob stood there, phone still in his hand, his eyes completely empty. He understood. He had not only lost a relationship, but also his career, his reputation, and possibly much more. Meanwhile, Evelyn carried on as usual. She worked, went about her daily life as if none of this concerned her. But in reality, she was aware of every single development. That evening, Jacob came home looking more exhausted than ever before. He walked in and saw Evelyn sitting in the living room, the lamplight casting a calm, cold glow on her face. "Evelyn," he called out, his voice hoarse. She looked up, her eyes devoid of emotion. "What is it?" "The project." "There's a problem," he said. Each word heavy. "I know, just 2 words. No surprise, no concern." Jacob stared at her, a disbelieving feeling rising in his chest. "You knew?" "Yes." A short answer, but it was enough to make him freeze. "Then why?" Before he could finish, Evelyn stood up. She walked toward him, her gaze direct. "Why do you think?" "No more hiding, no more acting." Jacob took a step back. In that moment, he understood everything from the hug that day, to the contract, to the money, to this very moment. "You." He couldn't form the words. Evelyn didn't smile. She just looked at him for a long time. "You haven't lost anything," she said, her voice steady. "You're just paying back what you chose to trade away." That sentence was the final cut. Jacob couldn't stand any longer. He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. For the first time, he truly felt the consequences, not the shame, not the embarrassment, but complete and utter ruin. And Evelyn? She turned and walked away without a backward glance, because for her, it had all ended a long time ago. What was happening now was just the fallout, a price they had to pay themselves. In the aftermath of the successive collapses, Jacob's life spiraled into a state he had never imagined. The company where he worked quickly decided to suspend him pending an internal investigation, a gentle phrasing that meant he had lost the position he was once so proud of. The calls that used to be about business now turned into probing questions, avoidance, or worse, silence. No one stood by him. No one wanted to be associated with him. His reputation vanished faster than he thought possible. But none of that was what devastated him the most. The thing Jacob couldn't bear was Evelyn's transformation. She didn't yell, she didn't blame, she didn't say another word after that night. She continued to live in the same house, going about her routines as normal, but she was completely detached from him. There were no more questions about his day, no more evenings spent sitting together, no more gestures of care. She existed, but she was no longer his wife. Her silence was more terrifying than any accusation. 3 days later, when things had settled into a grim new reality, Jacob finally broke. That evening, he stood outside Evelyn's home office, his hand on the doorknob, hesitating. It took him a few seconds to summon the courage to open the door. Evelyn was sitting in front of her laptop, the screen's glow casting a cold light on her face. She didn't look up when he entered. "What is it?" she asked, her voice flat. Jacob stood there, unsure where to begin. The words he had rehearsed in his head were now a jumbled mess. "Evelyn, He trailed off. For the first time, he realized he no longer had the right to start a conversation with her. Evelyn still didn't look at him. "If it's not important, you can leave." Her words felt like a knife in his chest. "I want to talk to you," he finally managed. She stopped typing but didn't turn around. "About what?" Just 2 words, but they were enough to make him choke. "I'm sorry." The room was silent. No reaction. No change. "I know I was wrong." His voice dropped. "I shouldn't have done it." "And so?" Evelyn cut in. She swiveled her chair to face him, her gaze direct and cold. "You're sorry, and then what?" Jacob stood frozen. He had no answer, because he didn't even know what he was hoping for. I want you to give me a chance," he finally said, his voice almost a plea. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. Her eyes held no anger, no pain, only absolute clarity. "A chance?" she repeated. "Do you think we can go back to how things were?" Jacob took a step forward. "I'll fix it. I'll make it right." "Make what right?" The question left him speechless, because there was nothing to fix. What was done could not be undone. Evelyn stood up. For the first time, she walked toward him, but the distance between them felt wider than ever. "Do you know what I can't accept?" "It's not what you did," she said, her voice steady. "It's that you chose to do it." Jacob looked down. unable to meet her gaze. I didn't make a scene, not because I wasn't hurting, she continued, but because I refused to become that kind of person. A moment of silence passed. But that doesn't mean I will let it go. That sentence was the verdict. Jacob looked up, his eyes filled with panic. Evelyn, I really… Enough, she interrupted. Not loudly, but with finality. You don't need to say anything else. She turned back to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a Grauman stack of papers. She placed them in front of him. Sign it. Jacob looked down. It was a divorce petition. His hands started to tremble. Do you really want this? He asked, his voice raw. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She just looked at him for a long time, then said something he would remember for the rest of his life. I don't need to get revenge on you, she said, her voice soft, but every word was clear. Your life has already done that for me. Jacob stood there, unable to move. It was over. Not with a fight, not with tears, but with an irreversible end. Evelyn said nothing more. She returned to in her chair and resumed her work, as if the conversation had never happened. But it was the final period at the end of their story. And this time there were no more chances. After he signed the divorce papers, everything moved faster than Jacob could have imagined. There were no disputes, no delays, no pleading. Evelyn handled all the legalities with clean, decisive efficiency. The home that was once their sanctuary was quickly divided. Jacob left with a few personal belongings, but what he left behind was everything that had once constituted his life. In the days that followed, he lived in a small, rented room, his life completely upended. He had no stable job, no family by his side, no one to check in on him. Everything he had once taken for granted was now a luxury. He used to think losing Evelyn was a choice, but now he understood it was a price. As for Evelyn, her life moved in a completely different direction. It wasn't loud or flashy, but every step was steady and sure. She dedicated more time to her business, expanding her operations and connecting with new partners. What she was building now wasn't a fake project designed as a trap, but a real, solid foundation. Her clarity and decisiveness earned her a new kind of respect from those around her. She was no longer just the gentle wife who took care of her home, but a woman who knew what she wanted and was in control of her own destiny. One afternoon, sitting in her new office, Evelyn received a text. It was from Jacob. How have you been? She looked at the screen for a few seconds, then set her phone down without replying. Not out of anger, but because there was simply nothing left to say. She stood up and walked to the window. The city below was bustling, but she felt a strange sense of peace. The heavy thoughts, the doubts, the unspoken wounds, they were all gone, put back in their proper place. A week later, at a business meeting, Evelyn carried herself with a quiet, confident poise. She didn't try to stand out, but the way she spoke and handled situations made people take notice. During the event, a man struck up a conversation with her, not with a rushed pickup line, but with a polite and engaging discussion. I'm impressed by how clear-headed you are in your work, he said. Evelyn offered a small smile. I just know what I want. The conversation was brief but left a pleasant impression. As she left, Evelyn didn't dwell on it. For her, right now, the most important thing wasn't a new relationship, but herself. That evening, back in her own home, she stood before the mirror, not to fix anything, but just to look. The woman staring back was still her, but her eyes were different. There was no more dependence, no more hesitation, only a calm strength. She thought back on everything that had happened, from the moment she stood outside Jacob's office to the embrace she would never forget, from the silence to the plan to the final outcome. The old her would never have thought she was capable of such a thing, but it was what happened that had changed. Her not to become colder, but to become clearer. Clearer about herself, her worth, and what she deserved. Her phone vibrated on the table. A new message. Not from Jacob, but from the man at the meeting. I hope we have the chance to collaborate again soon. Evelyn looked at the screen and smiled. This time she replied a short, professional message. Not too eager, not too distant, because she knew her life had turned to a new chapter, a chapter no longer dictated by the past, no longer bound to people who had left, but a chapter she was writing for herself. Outside, the city lights burned bright, and this time Evelyn was no longer standing in the shadows. She was stepping into the light, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply to be true to herself. And that was the greatest victory of all.